As we get into negotiations, and usually in the letter of intent, we are not necessarily defining a number, but we're looking at, the trailing 12-month average, 9-month average, or 6-month average. Mm-hmm. What's market today?
Yeah, it varies. I think the thing we see most often is a 12-month average. Mm-hmm. And if you're a steady state business, you obviously probably have some growth in the business, but if it's a normal level of growth, I think the thing we would generally see is a 12-month average of those balances. Now, if you're in a very high growth type of business where you would expect the working capital needs of the business to be accelerating just because sales are growing so fast, you might look at a shorter term, like say the last 3 months or 6 months, because that's just going to be more representative of what the business is going to be at closing.
Ultimately, how does working capital affect purchase price at the end of the day?
Yep. And maybe that's helpful to go through an example, and I think we'll have a graphic up on the video, but assume a company, now say you're a manufacturing company, right? So, as we think about the working capital, the primary components are going to be your accounts receivable, your inventory balances, maybe you've got some prepaids, those are usually smaller numbers, and then you've got accounts payable, and you've got your accrued expenses. So those are the things that are going to make up the components of working capital. So say we're using an average, and over the 12-month average, the net of all those numbers is $100,000. And we come to the closing, and generally what happens is, you come to the closing date and you make an estimate, and nobody closes their books perfectly on a certain date. So you're usually given time to actually close your books and define what the real working capital is. So we'll come back 30, 60, whatever days later. And ultimately we find maybe you had a situation where right before closing you had a really big sale. So that would maybe decrease your inventory because you've just shipped a bunch of product, but you're also getting margin on that product, so your AR has gone up more. So all else being equal, with that one big transaction right before closing, that would increase your working capital, say, to $110,000. So in that situation, kind of whatever the purchase price was, that additional $10,000 would go to the seller. And that feels right in some way, Bobby, right? Because, hey, I've just made this big sale and I'm not going to get any of that cash, but I get some benefit of it through the working capital. Now, take the opposite end of the spectrum. You could have a situation where, again, just based on timing of close, maybe the closing date was a day or two before you've done your check run for that week or every other week, however often you do it, and just because of that, your accounts payable are just much higher than they normally are. So in that situation, you may have a close where the working capital is, say, $90,000, and again, that $10,000 difference would come off the payment to the seller. And again, that feels right because, again, at the end of the day, you as the buyer would inherit just a higher level of AP than should be there just because of that timing.